Morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Utica. I'm Barb Freeman, clerk at the Board of Trustees. Whether you are visiting for the first time or have been a member for many years, you are welcome here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, you are welcome here. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you are welcome here. We are invited to bring our whole selves to this worship service. Our doubts as well as our convictions, the pain and joy we have known, our longing for connection and understanding. Every part of you is welcome here. If you are signing in today for the first time, we are glad that you have joined us. We would love to learn more about you and connect you with our newsletter if you like. There's a link in the chat to a form that we hope any visitors would fill out. And we hope you will stay for informal conversation in breakout groups after the service. We have one announcement today. The Board of Trustees is seeking 2 volunteers to attend the virtual GA General Assembly of the UUA, June 23 to 27. If you have questions, ask me or Branwen Drew, since we volunteered last year and enjoyed it very much. Let us open our hearts and minds to the experience of community and the wisdom of love.
I've been attending UU Utica for almost a year and a half. During this time, I've met so many amazing people. This is a small church, but everyone knows and greets everyone who comes in the door. I have the community here. It's so amazing. Before everything shut down, so many people helped me through so much. I have many opportunities. I had many opportunities last year because of it. There are several people in the church who have helped me through so much and became extremely close. When I stopped coming to virtual services, several people reached out to make sure I was okay. The money donated goes to benefit anyone in the church. When Unirondact announced that they were opening after the pandemic, the church helped me pay for some of the expenses of camp. This means a lot to me because last summer I did virtual camp, and one of the people I've met is going to camp this year. I get to meet the amazing people, both youth and counselors, that made quarantine feel less alone. If it weren't for the campership, I would not be able to go to camp as I hoped. Now I get to meet some of the people that have become really close to me. Thank you.
Here we are. Okay. Today's call to worship is by Leslie Takahashi. To worship means to consider that which has worth. Today, we consider with gratitude the many gifts of this community, the opportunity to be affirmed in who we are and to offer that affirmation to others, the chance to stand up together to help remake the world in the ideals of justice, the freedom to choose one's path to truth and to learn from the travelogues of others, the space to expand one's own spirit and to reconnect, and the aspirations to consider all life as precious. For if all is made of stardust, then how can it not be wondrous? So this morning, let's welcome all those gifts with gratitude, for these have been paid for with many currencies. The blood of martyrs, so we can be free in our religion, the sweat of those who persisted in justice's name, the tears of those who struggled to build a better life for others. These dollars and cents of those who gave what they could and then stretched it a little further. And now, with all this, let us enter into the worship with gladness in our hearts. Now we'll sing number 404, What Gifts Can We Bring?
gift can we bring? What present, what token, what words can convey it? The joy of this day, when grateful we come, remembering, rejoicing, what song can we offer in honor and praise? Give thanks for the past, for those who had vision, who planted and watered so dreams could come true. Give thanks for the now, for study, for worship, for mission that bids us turn prayer into deed. This gift we now bring, this present, this token, these words can convey it, the joy of this day, when grateful we come, remembering, rejoicing, this song we now offer in honor and praise.
Good morning. We are called to the chalice lighting this morning by Jennifer McLaughlin. As the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as that bud slowly opens with each new day, let us be like that first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays, and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. We light this chalice to bring a glimmer of that warmth into our space.
I'm joining you here from First Parish in Cambridge, and I want to thank the First Parish community and Reverend Adam Lawrence Dyer for offering their space to us. First Parish sits on the occupied land of the Massachusetts people. A community of the Massachusetts people still live in Massachusetts in the community of Canton. I have a story for you today. And there's two things that are important about this story. Number one, it's a true story. And number two, it's an anonymous story. So I read this story many years ago in Yes magazine, and the author of the story was listed only as Jane B. I love this story because it speaks to the fact that even in incredibly difficult circumstances, that the presence of love, that acts of generosity and hospitality really are life-saving. Here's Jane's story. Jane and her brother grew up in the 1940s in Hollywood, California, a town known for show business. Now, Jane says that she and her brother were adopted by their parents, not because their parents loved children, but because their parents thought it completed the image of the perfect Hollywood family. A beautiful home in Beverly Hills, a fleet of servants, 2 adorable children, and a little spaniel dog. Jane and her brother hardly ever saw their parents. They were largely raised by the housekeepers and nannies. It was only on Sunday when the whole family went to the country club. There, Jane and her brother were expected to be perfectly well behaved, not to run around or get dirty, to know which piece of silverware to use at every course, to be seen but not heard. They were taught to speak only when spoken to. Looking back, Jane said of herself, "I wasn't a real girl. I was a cardboard cutout of a girl." Jane's best memories from her childhood were when she was with her grandmother. And one day, her grandmother took her to a rummage sale in a church basement. Now, this was Hollywood, California. So this rummage sale was filled with costumes and fancy clothes that were from the movies or from movie stars. Jane's grandmother gave her $2, which was a lot of money at that time, and said, "Buy whatever you want." Well, Jane went home with 2 armfuls of things, and as soon as she got home, she ran straight up to her room with all of that loot, and she started trying things on. Finally, she settled on a little pink night dress, a big broad hat, white satin gloves, and every piece of costume jewelry that she bought. She looked at herself in the mirror, and Jane was awestruck. She looked like a different person. She decided to give herself a new name, Madame Modifus. Now, whereas Jane was quiet, Madame Modifus was bold. And whereas Jane was shy, Madame Modifus was flamboyant. And whereas Jane always did exactly as she was told, well, Madame Modipus, she had a mind of her own. Jane, all dressed up, ran down the stairs across the yard to the house next door and knocked on the door. When the mother next door and her little son opened the door, their jaws fell open. Jane said, "My name is Madame Modifus. May I come in for tea?" Well, the mother and her son, they welcomed Jane into their home. They played for hours, and then Jane went back to her house. Now, any time that Jane had a little bit of time to herself, she would get all dressed up and she would run to the neighbor's house, and they just came to call her Madame Modifus. Jane ends her story by sharing how she now is a grandmother, and that one of her favorite things to do is to visit her own grandchildren, and that whenever she goes to see them, they wait for her outside on the yard, and when she pulls into the driveway, they jump up and down and scream her name, Maudie, 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 the only name they've ever known her by.
Today's meditation is written by Hope Johnson of the UUA. We are one. We are one, a diverse group of proudly kindred spirits, here not by coincidence, but because we choose to journey together. We are active and proactive. We care deeply. We are one, working, eating, laughing, playing, singing, storytelling, sharing, rejoicing, Zooming, asking questions, listening, living our answers, learning to love ourselves, creating the blessed, beloved community together. We are one, giving of our talents and treasure so that this community can grow, can work toward justice, can promote care of the earth, can be a beacon for future generations. We are one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jack Pendrak. I'm a member of the Stewardship Task Force this year. This service is titled Loved into Being. It combines elements from our congregation as well as from the UUA and marks the beginning of our stewardship drive for the fiscal year, which runs from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. As you know, we have had to find innovative ways to function as a church since the beginning of the pandemic. Although we have to conduct our services on Zoom or Facebook rather than in person in our building, the work of our church community continues and is as important as ever. The theme of this year's campaign is planting seeds. Indeed, despite not being able to meet in person, our members are continuing to plant seeds of racial justice, LGBTQIA plus inclusivity and equality, social justice, and more. For instance, several of our members were instrumental in establishing a community garden in Utica, and our church was well represented in the March for Black Lives Matter on Oneida Street this summer. Continue to support our environment with climate change initiatives. Members of our congregation were involved in the extremely successful UU the Vote campaign. The list could continue, but I think you get the idea. Our church is not just a place to meet every Sunday, but is a vehicle for extending our love into the greater community. Additionally, the church has been in transition. We've had to develop new ways of being together. The Board of Trustees has brought Reverend Laurie in to help with the transition. Indeed, we are seeing seeds being planted as church leadership and committees reconsider how business is conducted and how we relate to each other by establishing a new covenant. Eventually, we will have a new permanent minister. We will be meeting in person at the church building, and we do expect to thrive. All of this requires the volunteer and financial support of you, the members and friends of UU Utica. Pledge packets went out electronically yesterday. You should have seen it in the email with the link for the service. So please check that out. Also on Friday, for those who don't have email, the packets went out in the mail. So you should be seeing that, I suppose, on Monday. If you haven't seen it, please check your email. Otherwise, please contact me or anyone in the Stewardship Task Force. The packet details the financial goals this year, but the goal I'd like to stress today is that we really do want 100% participation from members and friends, regardless of what level you pledge. If you have any questions about pledging, feel free to contact me or anyone in the Stewardship Task Force, or indeed anybody on the board or in leadership in the church. Now, as has been our practice, we have asked our church leadership to pledge in advance to demonstrate their commitment and to give us a good start to the campaign. So far, 16 of these church leaders have pledged more than $35,000, which is a really good start and represents about 38% of our goal. These are members of the board, as well as membership, worship, finance, and stewardship committees. Plus, we've got a couple of pledges from other people. To all those folks, I say thank you. Please make a pledge, and please be as generous as you can. If during the year your circumstances change, you can amend the pledge accordingly. As I mentioned, the title of this service is Loved into Being. We support this church because it is our chosen community. It is the community we have loved into being, continue to love into being. One last note, after the service, we will have breakout rooms with a member of the Stewardship Task Force in each room. It will be a time when you can share your story of why you come to this community and a time you can listen to others tell their story. Please join us. Thank you.
Yes, love is what I need to know my name. These words from the artist Seal capture the meaning of our story today. The story of Jane and her discovery of her full self and her real name, Maudie. Jane's story captured my attention the first time I read it. Her words, "I wasn't a real girl. I was a cardboard cutout of a girl." They stayed with me. It's clear the trauma and the pain of her home life. And this isn't unique or even uncommon for children, for any of us. So many of us know these experiences in our home lives, in our work lives, or in the stifling cultural conditions of oppression that seek to make us small, quiet, invisible. Conditions that seek to rob us of our fullness. But then something happens for Jane. Through the love of her grandmother, the generous embrace of the neighbors, and a little bit of imagination, Jane's full self, Maudie, finds expression. The freedom she experiences is in moments. Those moments when she's able to steal away from her house and go to her neighbors. But it is enough. These small moments of joy and love in the midst of the neglect and the suffering, they are life-saving. Zora Neale Hurston writes, "Love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place." And that is exactly what Maudie's soul does. She is loved into the fullness of her being. I hear echoes of my own story in this story. And maybe you do too. For me, in a time of tremendous difficulty in my life, my UU church was the neighbor's house, full of warmth and welcome, music and imagination. And the grandmother, that was my Sunday school teachers, whose love and care, coupled with joy and attention, it made a difference in my life when I most needed it. That congregation, that community, those teachers, they helped me find my voice, my spirit, my soul. They loved me into being. I imagine that you too have stories like this. How Unitarian Universalism, its theology, its people, its ministry changed you, saved your life, helped your soul crawl out of its hiding space. How it helped grow the size of your soul. As process theologian Bernard Loomer so powerfully describes, by size, I mean the stature of a person's soul, the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being and still maintain your integrity and individuality. There's so much expansiveness and generosity in Loomer's definition of the size of your soul. And he goes on, he says, I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development in their diversity and uniqueness. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. You see, Loomer is not just talking about individual growth and liberation. And this matters to us as Unitarian Universalists because our faith has never been solely about individual spiritual growth. As Unitarian Universalists, we understand salvation not as individual but collective. We recognize the fundamental interconnectedness, interdependence of all life and of humanity. Foundational to the core theological idea of interdependence is that mutuality and responsibility are inherent to who we are as human beings. We are not islands. And our tradition calls us not to individual freedom or transformation alone, but to the liberation and thriving of all people. One of the most important and successful campaigns within Unitarian Universalism over this past year was UU the Vote, a national effort for Unitarian Universalists to partner with local grassroots organizing and voting rights groups on an unprecedented voter engagement, voter registration, and voter turnout effort. It was the first ever effort like this on our part as a larger association, and it was awesome. But here's something you may not know about UU the Vote. When I first shared the idea for UU the Vote at the 2019 General Assembly, I didn't know if it would take hold. I was simply throwing out a seed of a dream, imagining there before thousands of you, congregational delegates at GA, I asked, what if we as UUs helped engage and mobilize 1 million people to vote in the 2020 election? When I said that, it was scary. It seemed impossible. And in fact, the next time I talked about UU the Vote at a local congregation, I reduced the number to 500,000. But before we'd even started to create the team and the infrastructure, when we were still just talking about this idea, congregational leaders, ministers, religious educators, and members were clamoring to volunteer. Financial gifts began coming in, some unsolicited. Folks were ready to say yes, ready to give generously of their time and resources because they knew that our values of justice and compassion, that our system of democracy and the literal lives and well-being of our neighbors, of our loved ones, of each other were on the line and on the ballot. Thousands of people volunteered. Thousands of donors came forward from our congregations, many of you, and together we invested tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of hours and well over $1 million to vote love in the 2020 election. And in the end, we reached well over 3 million potential voters, far exceeding our wildest dreams. In what was the largest, most transparent and accessible election in our history, we UUs played a significant role. And we were likely the largest, most organized, faith-based pro-democracy effort during the election. Wow. Imagination, generosity, commitment, collective action. These fueled UU the Vote. But there was also some magic to it, because it recognized our strengths and it invited us more fully into who we are. For we are the people who show up. We are the people who work together in community. We are people who believe in democracy, who understand our faith as active, who are concerned about the conditions of justice here and now, and who, when it comes right down to it, are a hopeful people. We are a hopeful people about what is possible and about our agency and capacity to meet the challenges of our time. Some of the magic of UU the Vote was that together we were loving each other into the fullness of who we are as Unitarian Universalists. But this isn't the end of the story. It is a reminder. It is a glimpse of what is possible when we say yes. When we say yes so generously and powerfully to what we believe in, to what we care about, to our ministries, our values, and when we choose solidarity, interdependence with wider networks of people working for justice, compassion, and liberation. From the beginning of my time as UUA president, I have said this is no time for a casual faith, no time for a casual commitment to what you love most, and this is no time to go it alone. UU the Vote is just one example of what it looks like to take our faith, our values, and our commitment to interdependence seriously. It is life-saving, life-changing ministry, individually in our own lives, and revolutionary when we bring that powerful yes out into the world. And this yes is what is needed so deeply in our communities and our world right now. To love our society, to love our world into a new place of being. In her important book, Caste, Isabel Wilkerson explores the conditions of racism, white supremacy, and racial hierarchy as an American caste system. And in her book, she quotes Gary Michael Tartikoff, an American scholar of castes, who says of the United States, "This is a civilization searching for its humanity. It dehumanized others in order to build its civilization, and now it needs to find its own." There's power in those words and that history. So how do we find our humanity as a society, as a country, as a civilization? The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said the key was love. By love, King did not mean a sentimental or romantic kind of love, but rather an overflowing, audacious, and unconditional love that sought the fullest unfolding of every person. King said this love might well be the salvation of our civilization. The only way that we overcome the forces of racism, domination, discrimination, dehumanization, the forces that are at the foundation of the United States, those forces that have the effect of dehumanizing our society, the only way we overcome those forces is to turn to the deepest source of our humanity. And as Unitarian Universalists, we know that that foundation, that source of our humanity, is our compassion and our interdependence, our mutuality and relationship and responsibility to each other. In other words, I would take Bernard Loomer's words and King's words and say, we need to grow the size of our love. And by size, as Loomer says, I mean the range and depth of your love, your capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer, to provide conditions that enable others to increase their stature, the size of their love and their soul. And this is where the real spiritual depth and calling of our faith lives, not just as an intellectual exercise, but as embodiment. Embodying and growing our capacity for this powerful form of love that encourages all of us to live into the fullness of our being and that is committed to the conditions that make this fullness possible for everyone. Compassion, interdependence. Looking back, the love of her grandmother, that trip to the church rummage sale, and the generous, inclusive embrace of her neighbors made a powerful difference to young Jane, to Maudie. Looking back, the warmth and magic of my UU church and the love and care of my Sunday school and youth leaders shaped my life and my calling in ways that I will always be grateful for and will never be able to repay. Looking back, UU the Vote became this incredible source of community, joy, and positive action in the midst of what was one of the most traumatic times in our lives. It drew us together in unprecedented ways and was a lifeline. And this is not the end of the story. It's just a glimpse, just a few stories to capture some of what is possible in all of our congregations when we say yes. When we say yes boldly, audaciously, powerfully to our values, to our spirits and our love, and to one another. These stories and more are happening all across our congregations. None of us will ever know all the difference that our generosity to our congregations has made to the lives of our children, our families, our elders, to the lives and conditions of our larger communities. We'll never know all the ways that we have helped make a difference. When we give boldly, generously, audaciously of our financial resources as we are able, we make our values and our ministry manifest in the world. When we give generously of our hearts and our care and our love to our children and families, elders and adults, young adults and youth, we change lives. We save lives. And when we dream big, as leaders and staff, about the impact we are called to make in the wider world, lives are changed. The material conditions of our communities can change. We are changed. We make it possible, loved into fullness, loved into being. May we keep saying yes, boldly, courageously, and lovingly to our values and our faith. May it be so.
There are sacred moments, sparkling moments, when we answer the call to live out our values, and in so doing, bless the world beyond our imaginings. These powerful, sparkling moments are times when we are truly alive, when we feel and know and demonstrate our values because of the principles that have claimed us, because of this faith that we share, because we have been loved into being. It is time for the offering. This is a chance to give of your tangible energy to benefit the congregation which has nurtured and grown you, so that in turn it can be a powerful presence for future generations. This is an opportunity to make manifest generosity. This is an invitation to align resources and highest values. Susan Frederick Gray said, "The most important thing you can do for Unitarian Universalism is to generously support your congregation. It's transforming lives." Let us give now because our congregation is transforming lives and communities for the better. Let us give because we have been loved into being and because we want this same gift to be available to others. Let us give because we want generosity to be our response to the world. The offering will both be given and received with abundant gratitude.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we go walk it out. And ooh,
what you got in your heart. You can have everything, but what does it mean? It all means nothing. Don't rise up for something. You just can't talk the talk. You gotta live the talk. Yes, you do. It all means nothing. Don't rise up for something. Rise up for you. Self-respect, dignity. If it's all that you've got, then it's all that you need. And without that, you don't have a thing. And it all means nothing. Rise up for something. Just can't talk the talk. You gotta live the talk. Yes, you do. And it all means nothing. Don't rise up for something. Rise up for you. Rise up, rise up, rise up, reach for you. And I'll rise up for you. Rise up, rise up, rise up, reach for you. And I'll rise up for you.
Please join me in reciting the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Our benediction this morning is by V. Emil Gudmundsson. And now, may we have faith in life to do wise planting, that the generations to come may reap even more abundantly than we. May we be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dreams of human kinship and justice. This we ask, that the fields of promise become fields of reality.
It's not the waking or the rising. It's the grounding of the foot uncompromising. It's not forgoing of the light. It's not the opening of the eyes. It's not the waking, it's the rising. It's not the shade we should be casting. It's the light and it's the obstacle that casts it. It's the heart that drives the light. It's the fire it ignites. It's not the waking, it's the rising. It's not the song, but it's the singing. It's the heaven of the human spirit ringing. It is the bringing of the light. It is the bearing of the rhyme. It's not the waking, it's the rising. And I could cry power, 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 Lord. Nina cried power, Billy cried power, David cried power. weekend is the rising. I just cry power, 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 let it cry power, James Brown cry power, Nina cry power, and I could cry power, send power, beat cry power, show me cry power, need a cry power, yeah. Really?